The Pentagon said the U.S. military has had unsafe encounters with the Chinese armed forces in the South China Sea during the novel coronavirus (COVID-19) pandemic, which is also a source of deepening tension between the two countries. There have been at least 9 concerning incidents involving Chinese fighter jets and U.S. aircraft in the skies above the contested waterway since mid-March, Reed Werner, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Southeast Asia, told Fox News on Tuesday, adding that China continues to engage in risky and escalatory behavior. A defense official told Insider that some incidents were considered unsafe, though the specific details behind the incidents are unclear. Werner also told Fox News that a Chinese escort ship sailing with a Chinese aircraft carrier group maneuvered in an unsafe and unprofessional way near the U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer USS Mustin in the South China Sea last month. Chinese media reports indicated that a Chinese Navy flotilla led by the Liaoning was conducting mock battles in the South China Sea in April. Werner told Fox that the Pentagon found the current trend line very worrisome, adding that the U.S. has lodged several formal and informal complaints in response to recent incidents. Pentagon spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Dave Eastburn said in a recent statement that the Department of Defense was concerned by increasing, opportunistic activity by the PRC to coerce its neighbors and press its unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea (SCS), while the region and the world is focused on addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. The Defense Department has said that U.S. adversaries are trying to take advantage of the global situation but has also stressed that the U.S. military remains ready to meet that challenge and defend U.S. interests. The U.S. military has increasingly sought to make its presence known in the South China Sea and the larger Indo-Pacific region, especially after the coronavirus sidelined the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt. In recent months, U.S. Navy ships have conducted patrols and freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, as well as Taiwan Strait transits, and U.S. Air Force bombers have carried out patrols in the region. U.S. operations have continued since March. Navy vessels have conducted 3 freedom of navigation operations challenging China's territorial claims to the Paracel and Spratly Islands. U.S. ships carried out multiple presence operations near a South China Sea standoff. And Navy warships, including the large amphibious assault ship USS America, have conducted joint drills with other nations, and Air Force B-1B Lancers have carried out 2 strategic bomber patrols. Tensions in the South China Sea, where the U.S. and Chinese militaries have had a number of unpleasant interactions over the years, come as the U.S. and China spar over the COVID-19 outbreak that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives worldwide. The Trump administration, which has come under a lot scrutiny for its handling of the coronavirus at home, has repeatedly criticized China's missteps, which the U.S. says caused a troubling problem that began in China and evolved into a global crisis. Even as additional sailors assigned to the COVID-stricken USS Theodore Roosevelt display symptoms of the coronavirus, including several personnel who had been quarantined in Guam and allowed back on the ship after testing negative, the Navy today sent the carrier back to sea. Along with other recent moves, the Navy's redeployment of the TR, as the nuclear-powered carrier is called, suggests a Pentagon drive to reassert U.S. military dominance in an area increasingly being visited by Chinese forces. Both countries have dispatched heavily armed ships into the East and South China Seas in what might be called show-of-force operations, intended to showcase military muscle and discourage further adventurism by the other side, a dynamic that can easily lead to accident, miscalculation, and a perilous spiral into full-fledged war. Sino-American jousting in these waters has, of course, been ongoing for some time. Ever since China claimed the South China Sea as part of its territorial waters and converted some uninhabited atolls and islets there into miniature military bases, steps deemed illegitimate by an international tribunal in The Hague, Washington has sought to demonstrate its rejection of China's claims by regularly sending Navy vessels there in what are termed freedom of navigation operations. Typically, these missions involve the dispatch of 1 or 2 U.S. destroyers into waters off the militarized islands. China, to demonstrate its resolve in the matter, usually deploys ships and planes of its own to shadow or harass the American warships. In early May, a pair of U.S. naval vessels, the littoral combat ship USS Montgomery and the naval supply ship USNS Cesar Chavez, were deployed in waters of the South China Sea claimed by Malaysia to prevent harassment of a Malaysia drillship by Chinese Coast Guard and fishing vessels. Also in May, the Navy's Pacific Fleet Submarine Force announced that all of its forward deployed subs were at sea and engaged in contingency response operations, a highly unusual statement about U.S. submarine deployments for a normally tight-lipped organization. All of these moves are said to be part of a larger effort to inform Beijing that, coronavirus or not, the United States is prepared for a full-scale military engagement in the Western Pacific. By countering aggressive Chinese behavior in the South China Sea, he continued, "We send a clear message to Beijing that we will continue to protect freedom of navigation and commerce for all nations, large and small." The Chinese appear to be following a similar playbook, stepping up their naval operations in the East and South China Seas and issuing increasingly strident denunciations of the U.S. presence there. In the South China Sea, Chinese warships have continued to shadow and harass U.S. vessels engaged in FRONOPS operations, as well as ships belonging to neighboring countries with claims of their own to those contested islands. If all these activities by both China and the U.S. continue to accelerate at the pace we've been witnessing over the past 2 months, it will not be long before one side or the other intentionally or otherwise precipitates a major incident with loss of life, and from there, anything could happen. Imagine, for example, if a Chinese warship shadowing an American destroyer on a FRONOP mission in the South China Sea rams that ship, resulting in the deaths of American sailors. Or the other way around, a Chinese ship appears to be intent on ramming the American vessel, and its captain authorizes the use of lethal force to prevent that from happening, resulting in the deaths of Chinese sailors. What then? Will calm heads prevail in Beijing and Washington? Or will one side or the other, or both, authorize retaliatory steps, leading to a spiral of escalatory moves and a full-scale air and naval war in the Pacific?